The bomb has exploded. AfD equated by the judges, an avalanche of power is rolling unstoppably through political Berlin. A single sentence from Karlsruhe and the AfD is transformed from an outsider to a central player in the Republic. Karlsruhe speaks plainly, without kid gloves. What yesterday seemed like a grotesque fantasy stands today as hard reality in the room. The Federal Constitutional Court has delivered a verdict that shakes the Republic and marks a political turning point. The message is razor sharp. The systematic exclusion of a democratically elected party is unconstitutional. With a single blow, this verdict pulverizes the established practice of the old parties, blocking unwelcome competition in committees, presidiums, and speaking times. Everywhere where power is distributed. In Berlin, the bomb detonates. No sooner is the verdict published than the capital falls into shock. Crisis meetings deep into the night, hectic phone calls between party headquarters and ministries, empty press releases with much pathos and little substance. Panic is spreading like wildfire through the factions. NY Faeser complains of a dangerous step backward, as if the judges had not confirmed the basic law but a historical error. Radar Lang warns pathetically against a normalization of the right, as if a monster were about to storm the palace. And Friedrich Merz is silent, a silence that speaks louder than any word, the silence of a man who senses that his course is idling. But this judgment is not a legal coincidence, but embedded in a line of historical precedents. Already in 2003 and 2017, attempts were made to ban the NPD, and Karlsruhe rejected both proceedings. Why? Because the basic law sets enormously high hurdles. The court signaled at the time that as long as a party is not banned, Article 21 GG applies. It has the same rights as everyone else. Today, Karlsruhe is now intervening, this time not in the sense of a ban, but as a protective shield against systematic exclusion. This closes the circle. For decades, the principle of equal treatment of parliamentary groups was undisputed in Germany. But at some point, the established parties felt empowered to disregard this principle, as if they could determine which voices count and which do not. With the new verdict, Karlsruhe is pulling the emergency brake. It reminds the Republic of a bitter but clear truth. The basic law takes precedence over party tactics, and anyone who tries to push the political opponent out of the game with procedural tricks risks not only a political debacle but a judicial slap in the face of historical proportions. No sooner was the verdict from Karlsruhe public than political Berlin turned into a madhouse. In the factions of the old parties, there was sheer panic. You could see it in the faces of the deputies, hear it in the nervous whispers in the corridors, crisis meetings late into the night, chains of phone calls between party headquarters and ministries, hasty press statements that conveyed more despair than substance. A system that had considered itself invulnerable for decades was caught red-handed breaking its own rules. Nancy Faeser spoke with a trembling voice of a dangerous step backward. But a step backward from what? From the rule of law, from the equal treatment that is enshrined in the basic law. Her words seemed like the helpless attempt to reinterpret a judicial victory of the law as a political error. Radar Lang brandished the moral cudgel and warned against the normalization of the right, as if it were a matter of inviting a monster into the drawing room. But in truth, it was not the right that was normalized, but the basic law that was finally taken seriously. And Friedrich Merz's silence echoed through the city. He knew that the strategy of the firewall, with which he wanted to maneuver himself into the Chancellor's seat, had crumbled overnight. His course seems powerless, his project hollow. At the same time, the major media outlets delivered the expected script. Tagesschau warned with a raised finger against a dangerous revaluation of the AfD. Der Spiegel fantasized about state failure. The Süddeutsche Zeitung saw the rule of law in danger. But where is the danger if the highest court simply applies the constitution? This is exactly where the real explosive power unfolds. Karlsruhe emphatically recalled Article 38 GG, the principle of equality of mandates. Every vote counts equally. None may be devalued by exclusion. Article 21 GG was also brought to the fore. Parties are an integral part of democracy as long as they are not banned. The so-called firewall, invoked for years by the CDU to the SPD, simply does not exist in the basic law. It was always just a political catchphrase, a rhetorical construct, and now it has been disenchanted with a stroke of the pen. Particularly explosive, the verdict falls only a few weeks before the state elections in North Rhine-Westphalia on the 14th September 2025. Precisely now, when the CDU under Merz has focused every phase of its campaign on demarcation, the foundation of its strategy is shaken. Election campaign plans based on demonization are faltering. The signal to the citizens is clear. Not party tactics, but the basic law determines the rules. And this signal unleashes shockwaves far beyond Berlin. In Eastern Germany, where people still vividly remember the GDR bloc party system, the verdict is doubly strong. Many see parallels. Once again, parties in the power cartel wanted to determine who belongs and who does not. But this time, Karlsruhe has clearly rejected the logic of the one-party state. The basic law, not party resolutions, sets the limits. A déjà vu with explosive power and a lesson that resonates deeply. Suddenly, the AfD is no longer the eternal outsider, but a legitimate player in the political game. With a single court ruling, the playing field has shifted, not through elections, but through a return to the law. The first figures confirm the quake. A flash poll by INSA shows that the AfD is gaining 3% points nationwide. In Saxony and Thuringia, it is scratching at the 35% mark. For the CDU, this value becomes a nightmare. SPD and Greens are crashing. Within hours, the balance of power has shifted. The citizens feel it. The judiciary is not a pawn of politics. The rule of law lives, and it also protects those whom one cannot stand politically. This is precisely where the real explosive power lies. For decades, it has been suggested that fundamental rights are flexible, depending on whether a party pleases the elites or not. Karlsruhe has shattered this thinking. The message is, all voices are worth the same. For the AfD, this is a jackpot. No sooner was the verdict spoken than Weide, Kropala and Höcke stepped in front of the cameras, press conferences, talk shows, social media offensives, an orchestrated victory tour. Their message, we never gave up, we relied on the law and we won. These sentences act like dynamite because they reflect the feelings of many citizens. For years, millions of people have felt ignored, mocked and disenfranchised by the established parties. For them, this judgment is a late confirmation. Yes, the system wanted to keep us small, but now there are no more excuses. Particularly explosive, the AfD is gaining not only rhetorically, but institutionally. With seats on committees and presidiums, it gains access to files, confidential information, and committees of inquiry. This gives the party tools in the future that the political establishment has monopolized for years. A scenario that is causing nervousness in Berlin. One is already imagining how the AfD initiates committees of inquiry against government policy, be it on Ukraine aid, the energy crisis, or financial scandals, while the old parties stagger against it. For years they pursued the same strategy: isolate, block, exclude. They called it the firewall. In reality, it was a cartel to maintain power. This construct has now been burned. Strategy papers that were still valid weeks ago suddenly seem like waste paper. Election campaign plans that relied on demonization are crumbling to dust. For how can one demonize a party that the highest court has recognized as equal? It hits the CDU particularly hard. While Friedrich Merz in Berlin insists on the distance strategy, state associations in the East are signaling a willingness to talk. They know that whoever ignores the AfD there will lose touch. The party is caught in a tug-of-war between party discipline and realpolitik. A scenario that is reminiscent of the last years of the GDR, when the bloc parties formally held together, but in fact more and more citizens lost confidence. Today, the pattern is repeated, only this time in a democratic guise. Alice Weidel calls it a historic victory for democracy. Tino Kropala emphasizes, we relied on the law and won. Björn Höcke announces, now we will consistently use all political possibilities. The party immediately goes on the offensive. Press conferences, talk shows, social media campaigns, always with the same message. We were excluded for years, but we persevered. We trusted in the rule of law and we were proven right. For millions of citizens who have felt betrayed by the old parties for years, this is a liberating blow. A pensioner in Leipzig says, I have never voted for the AfD, but after this verdict I am considering it. A young mother from Munich writes, no one speaks about our worries except the AfD. An entrepreneur from Essen comments, I don't want extremists, I want fairness. This verdict was fairness. These voices are poison for the establishment. They show that the verdict has an impact far beyond party lines. It is changing not only the AfD but the political climate throughout the country. The consequences are concrete. In the state parliaments, committees must be restaffed. In the Bundestag, CDU and SPD are losing posts that they previously claimed exclusively. The Greens see their strategies blocked. The FDP is losing influence and the AfD is suddenly gaining access to information. Say in personnel decisions, power to shape parliamentary processes. Exactly what the old parties have wanted to prevent for years is now reality. Not through an election, but through the return to the rule of law. But the shockwaves do not end at the German border. In Warsaw, the government parties are cheering. In Budapest, Viktor Orban speaks of the victory of common sense. In Rome, the Fratelli d'Italia are celebrating. Marine Le Pen in France and Geert Wilders in the Netherlands are immediately using the verdict for propaganda purposes. Look, even Germany has to treat us equally. Brussels, on the other hand, is becoming alarmed. The EU Commission warns of an erosion of democratic standards, a grotesque argument considering that Karlsruhe has merely applied the basic law. International media react differently. The New York Times speaks of a legal turning point. Le Monde headlines, "The mirror image of Europe has cracks." This makes it clear that the verdict has a European dimension. It deepens the divide between national rule of law and the ideology from Brussels. For the AfD, this is the template they have been waiting for. It is targeting not only politics but now also the media. Party representatives announced that they will focus on public broadcasting. Fees, broadcasting councils, program balance. Should Karlsruhe intervene again, that could be the next shock, right into the heart of media power. The old parties are reacting nervously. Initial voices are calling for a restriction of the powers of the Constitutional Court. Others are dreaming of legislative changes to weaken the ruling. But the more obvious these maneuvers are, the clearer the citizens recognize. The fear runs deep. A déjà vu for many in the East who remember the GDR. Whoever tampered too much with the rules back then ultimately lost the trust of the people. Today, history repeats itself and the judiciary shows that it is stronger than political power games. Germany is at a turning point. The 2025 federal election will take place under completely new signs. An AfD that is no longer considered an outsider, but a legitimate force. A CDU that is torn between demarcation and cooperation. An SPD that is sinking into insignificance. Greens whose moral authority is eroding. The verdict from Karlsruhe has reshuffled the cards. The Federal Constitutional Court has set the table. But the people decide how it is played. This judgment will go down in the history books as the day on which the rule of law defied the party state. As a day on which citizens gained hope. Hope for a country in which not arbitrariness but law prevails. The shock is real, the panic understandable, but the path is clear. Whoever is serious about democracy must let it apply to everyone, even to those whom one does not like. The international dimension makes the whole thing even more significant. While Brussels is sounding the alarm, many European parties see the verdict as confirmation that the wind is turning. From Warsaw to Budapest to Rome, the chain of those who feel encouraged extends, and at the same time, awareness grows in Germany. The rule of law protects not only majorities but also minorities. Dear viewers, if you liked this analysis, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with friends. This helps even more people understand what this judgment really means. But with all the excitement, we should pause. This judgment is not just a victory or defeat for one party. It is a signal that our democracy is based on clear rules. No matter how you feel about the AfD, the basic law protects the rights of everyone. The lesson is clear. The rule of law must never be relativized in terms of party politics. Democracy thrives on equal treatment, even if it is uncomfortable. This analysis is based on publicly available information and comments. Despite the greatest care, it cannot be ruled out that individual details are incomplete or incorrectly presented. Please note that the assessments expressed here do not represent an absolute truth. Political developments can change at any time. This content is not intended to spread misinformation but to stimulate debate. The official and current information from the responsible institutions is always authoritative.